Good morning, and thanks so much for waking up with us. I'm Tiffany Green, your host of Spectrum. This morning, we're joined by Lauren Gay, and she's got a really interesting story and really something unique that she's created called Outdoorsy Diva. And it's a blog and just going around and really putting a different spin or twist on an outdoors travel feel. So, Lauren, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's so good to be here.
So, for our listeners who may not be familiar with Outdoorsy Diva, please enlighten them about what it's all about.
Okay, so Outdoorsy Diva, the full name is actually Misadventures of an Outdoorsy Diva. That's the blog. And I started it actually 5 years ago. It came out of a desire to share the experiences that I had with me and my son. We started kayaking because it's something we always wanted to try. We started camping. We go to different state parks. We go to theme parks. We like to zip line. So we're always doing things that are a little bit out of character for our community and what we consider kind of the norm. But I would share it on my social media, and friends would always say, "Oh, I didn't know about that," or "Oh my God, I would love to try that." So it just kind of sparked this whole idea, like, okay, well, let's start talking about it. Let's share these stories and see where it takes us. And the journey that this blog has just taken me on has been absolutely amazing.
I'm first curious to know where it's taking you in terms of the different sites and cities and experiences that you've had.
That's a loaded question. And I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'll do kind of maybe the top 3 or 4. So I think number one, like the best trip was my trip to the Azores Islands. For those of you not familiar, that's a chain of islands. They're actually owned by Portugal. Smack in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's absolutely breathtaking. It was the first international solo trip that I took by myself. So it was just kind of a challenge to push myself, to test my limits, to test my boundaries. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like, I feel like everyone should go there once in their lifetime. The second one is probably when I was able to take my son to the UK last summer. That was his first trip, really going abroad. You know, we had been on cruises, so he's been to the Caribbean and a number of islands, but to actually go through customs, actually stay, and, we did a flat through, Airbnb and through the hotels.com type of thing. So he really got the feel for a local, living in London. So it's London. It was a nice, easy way to introduce him, but it still has very different nuances and different money. And we took, the tube, and so he learned to navigate the subway system. And then I think the third one is probably our trip to Utah. So I don't just talk about international travel. I think that the United States has some of the most beautiful places, honestly, in the world, and we overlook it. So I was fortunate enough to work with the Bear Lake Valley Tourism Board. That's actually a little bit north of Park City. I also worked the Park City Tourism Board. And there's also a glamping camp called Conestoga Ranch. So they had us come out to Utah. We stayed in these amazing open air safari style tents in the mountains overlooking what they call the Caribbean of the Rockies. It's a turquoise lake, and it is breathtaking. There's lots of pictures of that on the blog because you just have to see it to believe it. But that whole week was one of the best weeks of Jalen and I's lives. Like, we saw a moose, we kayaked on this massive lake. He actually fell in because he was paddleboarding. That's a whole other story. Staying in the glamping tents was awesome. We met all kinds of different people. We just saw things and did things that we ordinarily would have never done. We also got to play at the Olympic Park that they have there in Park City. In the spring and the summer months, it goes from being a ski resort and a training ground to being an outdoor playground. So they turn it into zip lines and alpine slides and alpine coasters. And you get to see the skiers train in the summer by going down those slopes, and they actually flip into the pool to practice those ski jumps. So that was cool. So those are probably some of the top three that have been a direct result of doing the blog.
If you're not already intrigued or really interested, I don't know what's happening with you right now, because all of that sounds so amazing. And you just painted that picture in such a way that now I want to go visit Utah. I've never been there before. And that's one of those states where, I want to take advantage of what we have here in the U.S. Quickly enlighten our listeners as to your website or blog site.
The website is www.outdoorsydiva.com.
All right. So there seems to be an educational component, many different components, but an educational one seems to stand out. And you've talked about the experience that you've had with your son, but the opportunity to just kind of learn about different areas, different people, all different types of things. Can you speak to, I guess, the educational piece of it and what you've been able to learn and pick up along the way, and how it's helped you just then coming back home in a regular work setting or in your community?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned has been how we're really innately connected to nature. So that's the outdoorsy part, right, of the Outdoorsy Diva. It's kind of like two personas meshed together, because I'm sorority girl and girly girl, and I like makeup and shopping and all the stereotypical girl stuff. But I love nature. I really love nature. So what I have learned is that that's my reset. Whether it's a park or it's being on a lake or it's on one of our springs in Florida, in the mountains, that's a time to stop and just kind of connect and commune with God. It's kind of a time to just self-evaluate. So it's healing. And that's something that I really would like to see our youth and our kids and our community to kind of get back to, because that's not really foreign to like our grandparents. They kind of grew up in a different time, but now we get so connected online and with social media. And I'm a blogger and I'm an influencer, so I know it's like complete oxymoron, right? Because I'm telling you to disconnect, but sometimes you need to disconnect. Like everything is not done for the gram, if you will. So I think the educational component of it is try something new. Step out of your comfort zone. That's kind of my other big tenet is I push people to try something different. I have a Facebook group that was actually requested from my readers because they wanted a space to come together and talk, and it's called Adventure is a Lifestyle on Facebook. And that's what we talk about. We talk about how everything in life is an adventure. So whether it's trying a new food, you went to a new state park, you took a trip that you hadn't had before, you planned a trip with your family, you just had a new experience, whatever that is, it's an adventure. So I think just pushing yourself, breaking boundaries, trying something new, like that's the lesson. You have one life, so why not live it to the fullest,
Yeah, I agree. And you said you were very much a girly girl. So this whole notion of glamping, then I've got to dig a little bit deeper into what is glamping all about. It's camping, right?
Yes.
And then mixed with.
So it's glamorous camping.
Oh my goodness.
100% that is glamping. So prime example, the ranch that we went to in Utah, it's a safari style tent, right? So picture a safari like what you would think, the big open air tent with the logs and all of that. But there's hardwood floors. There's electric fur blankets. There's a bathroom inside, like a full bathroom with a tub with their signature scented lotions and soaps. There's like a down pillows and
wait a minute, so you're not
and you have a fire valet to come and light your fire. Now this is the extreme end of glamping. It doesn't have to be that glamorous, but basically you have all of your creature comforts that divas like. But when you look outside, I'm still outside. I'm still in nature. I'm still looking at mountains and this lake, and I hear the birds and I see all the stars at night. So you get the nature without the roughing it.
I'm sure those who are in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or Eagle Scouts are thinking to themselves, what happened to, pitching a tent and starting your own fire and such?
And I'm a proponent for that too. For my birthday last year, I went to Cayo Costa State Park here in Florida. It's actually an island. Took the ferry to the island, brought my tent, my backpack. I pitched my own tent by myself. I roughed it. I have a little thin air mattress. I have my little, my campfire meals, and I'm good with that too. Like I like the serenity of it. I like the challenge. But let's face it, I'm over 35 now, so sleeping on the ground. I've kind of crossed that one off the bucket list. Like, it's okay, but I like both. I'm a proponent of both. But I think having this other option gets people to have that nature experience that ordinarily may never try it. There are just some people who are not going to sleep in a sleeping bag. Like my mom, not going to happen. Can I convince her to go glamping? Absolutely. So I think it's a good balance for both, and it's just a really good way to get people out and into the parks. Like one of our state parks has a yurt. That's another option. It's an enclosure. It does have air conditioning, thank God, because this is Florida. It has the hardwood floors and it has furniture, but that's it. You still build your own campfire and you'll still feel like it's a camping trip. It's just a little less work.
So I'm curious to know about just within the state of Florida. You talked about the richness throughout this country, but I think Florida is oftentimes looked at as, a destination, a place to settle, and we're lured in by the beaches and the weather for at least part of the year. But what have you found to be kind of one of those hidden gems within Florida that you explored during this time?
Oh, Florida it's a gold mine for adventure. My favorite place to explore are all of our Florida springs that we have all throughout Florida, right here from the Bay Area. An hour away is Weeki Wachee, and it is one of the most pristine, beautiful, clear, turquoise rivers and springs you will ever see in your life. It's my favorite run to kayak. I've actually taken the group on a kayak trip there. I recently went to Silver Springs. They had a Springs weekend just about a month ago. And that's another beautiful spring. I mean, there are countless springs, and some of them are within the Florida State Park system. Some of them are privately run. And I encourage everybody to see them at least once in your life. You can swim with manatees. You can take clear, riverboat rides. You can just look at them. You can swim in them. Rainbow River has the tubing that we like to do every year when they open up in the spring. So I think the springs is probably my number one. We even have Devil's Den, which is in Williston outside of Gainesville. Devil's Den is actually a prehistoric cavern. It's underground, and you go down these steps into this underground cavern, and then you are met with the bluest water you have ever seen. It's blue, it's crystal clear, and you can snorkel in it. It's been featured all over the world, and I think that pin on Pinterest and the one for Weeki Wachee are probably two of my most pinned pins. They've been pinned at this point, well over 10,000 times. They are some of my most popular blog posts. So if you go on the blog, you can learn about how you get to them, how much they cost, what you need to know. They're not very expensive. So I think the springs is probably, honestly, if people knew what I know about the springs, you go there more than you go to the beach.
Right. Wow. And so again, remind us of your website.
www.outdoorsydiva.com and Outdoorsy Diva across all the socials.
So then how do you determine kind of where do you go? Like the amount of research. So sometimes people can say, oh, I'm just going to up and go here because so-and-so said so. But I imagine that there is a research component and time that you really have to look into where you're going and then figure out logistics. So how do you then determine where you're going to go?
Honestly, I don't. There is really not that much planning that goes into it. I know people think that I do. I'm a very spontaneous type of person. I will say, I follow the sites like our Visit Florida site. I follow our Florida State Park site. So a lot of those have kind of given me an adventure bucket list, if you will. And every year I start the year off with a list. And I call it my adventure bucket list of places I'd like to check off of that list. That's honestly about as much planning as I get into. I'm a football mom. So when I have free time, it's not always known that I'm going to have this free time. So there's been many a morning where I've woken my son up and be like, hey, we don't have anything to do. All right, let's go. We're going to the state park. And so it's not, I look up just on the state park website is honestly a wealth of information that people don't realize. And it'll tell you your basics, your admission, the times, what you can and can't do, what you can and can't bring. So I always check that. TripAdvisor is another one that's always, will give you honest reviews and just kind of give you a quick overview of what you need to know. Now, when it comes to travel and big trips, I plan my trips on Pinterest.
So you totally take in the whole social media influencer, side when it comes to traveling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with Pinterest, it's your personal pin board. It's like having a pin board at home of a bunch of pictures. People have vision boards. You say where I want to go. Well, I create new boards of places I like to visit. I look at other travelers' blogs. I look at, TripAdvisor. I always use the CVB, which is Convention Visitor Bureau, for those of you that might not be familiar. But pretty much all destinations have some form of that, which is like their tourism board. So I'll just save and pin these different sites to my board. And then when I'm ready to commit to the trip and pick a date, that's what I go back and refer to. So that's how I'll build my itinerary. I set my Google flight alerts. I set alerts on TripAdvisor for flights so that I know when they're going to be cheap and catch the deals. That's a whole other room when you talk about deals. Because my son and I flew to London last year for $500 total for both of us, round trip on British Airways.
How is that even possible? I hear, sometimes you hear of those types of deals existing, but you don't think you can actually catch them or know of anybody who has actually benefited from them.
They're real. They are a real thing. And I got the notification in enough time. I looked at the dates and I booked it. It was really that simple, and they happen more often than not. You just have to be flexible. If you're rigid and when you can travel, you won't be able to take advantage of them. But if you can plan your travel around the deal, then that's when you can take advantage of them. Like the trip to the Azores, I booked that through Groupon Getaway. I planned that trip in less than a month.
But so to that point, I mean, if you're listening, you may think to yourself, well, that's great, you can travel, but obviously you also have to make sure that your pennies are in line to be able to do those things as well. I mean, how do you suggest people preparing for that? I'm assuming you keep kind of like a travel fund going.
You do. Things there's these days, there are all kinds of ways that you can save money and you divert, a certain amount of money into that fund. Smarty Pig is a really popular one that some people like to use. I just have multiple savings accounts for certain reasons, and I have a travel fund. But in the last 3 years, now that the blog's a business, I've actually just been very blessed and able to have some of the costs offset for my travel. Some of it completely, some of it partially. So if all I have to do is get to a destination, but everything else is taken care of, then it's kind of started to pay for itself, which is really nice.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and I would love for you to kind of break down, how you turned it in from a passion to a business, because we see that happen so many different times in so many different ways for people. You hear these stories of, man, I just love this. This is where my heart is. I can wake up every day and do it. And then before long, it turns into a business, and a very successful one. And it sounds like yours is not only successful, but continuously growing. So how did you make that transition?
It happened because after it had been about a year of having the blog and it was just for fun, and I went to my first travel conference up in Ohio. That opened my eyes to this whole other realm of possibilities. And, the buzzword is monetizing. And so that's what they kept talking about, monetizing your blog and how to earn income from your blog. And it was just things that I had never heard of. So from being an affiliate for different things like Amazon and TripAdvisor and hotels.com and ads and all kinds of things that you can have on your site, right? But you can also, you pitch to work with brands and they pay for that kind of exposure. Working with convention visitor bureaus, a lot of them will have a budget for that. And they need content for their sites a lot of times, and so they're willing to pay you for that. I've gotten really proficient, I have to say, so I can call myself a photographer. I'm working on calling myself what I am. So that's another component in a way that you can earn income is from my travel photos. I've had photos that I've sold from Instagram that people wanted to use. I've licensed photos to different brands. I have photos on Shutterstock that were approved to sell. So that's another growing avenue. And then you have sites that you create merchandise from. So I have merchandise based on my travel photos. It's amazing what people like to buy. Someone wanted a pillow with this awesome picture of the Mayan ruins on it, and I was happy to sell it to them. I also have a t-shirt line, which is just sayings that I say all the time on my own. So that was just another avenue. So the first step was, figuring out your business structure, whether you're going to be an LLC or a corporation, and getting that paperwork in place, working on your copyrights and all of that. I'm by no means an expert on that, and I'm learning as I go. But once you do that, there's an endless possibility, honestly, of ways for you to monetize your passion.
Right. That's so interesting. And I want to go back to a point that, you talked about earlier, and I jokingly may have said something about eat, pray, love, but there is a personal side to it, right? Where you just kind of reconnect with self and really reevaluate what's happening or just evaluate where you are and what's happening in life. And so, in terms of, some would have a spiritual connection and that with nature and God. And so for you, what is that like? I mean, Eat, Pray, Love, it was a very popular book that turned into a movie. You said you need to write a book. I mean, I'm assuming you may try to monetize there as well, but just in terms of your connection.
For me, that's absolutely the connection. And I have to be honest, it can burn you out, right? Because I still have a career. I still have my day job. I have a kid to put through school. So I haven't quite taken that leap of full time like a lot of people have. But sometimes you just have to step away. So I even had, I had a bout with depression last year, and a lot of people didn't know it, would have never known it. And I opened up about it on the blog, I think in January or February. I shared that post, and the response was overwhelming because people were not happy to see that I was depressed, obviously, but happy to know that I'm human, right? That there's a real person behind this persona and the Instagram photos and the blog post and the tweets like, oh, she's just like me. And it was a lot of, I went through that too. I'm so glad to know I'm not alone. And I talked about, how my go-to was nature and in a reset and how that wasn't working. And so when that wasn't working, okay, I had to get professional help. And that's okay. You have to know what you need to do to get back into the groove of things and to just manage it. So for me, that connection with nature is huge and it's a reset. And sometimes it's not enough. And that's okay. So I think, like you mentioned, Eat, Pray, Love, I love that book. It's one of my faves. It definitely made me want to see more of the world. And it's just so, I don't know, it's mind blowing to me that I've been able to use my blog and my own words and experiences to have that same effect on other people. So I get emails all the time and messages through social media all the time, mostly from women, especially other single mothers like myself, who have been really inspired to know that it's going to be okay, to know that, the difficult times they can still push through, that it's okay to do something nice for themselves, that it's okay to travel, it's okay to try something different, it's okay if you don't feel good. It's okay if you're not happy today, all of that. So, not only being able to heal myself, but also one of the greatest things about having the blog at all.
How does then, and thank you for sharing that part of your story, because I think, it's even cathartic to hear, you know, someone kind of flushing out and sharing their story. I'd lastly just kind of want to move to the sense of what's next, right? Where does Outdoorsy Diva go from here? What adventures await?
So that's also a loaded question. So I have a senior going off to college very soon this summer. Actually, I have not been able to travel nearly as much, as I had before, and that was just due to his schedule and being a momager for football. But I'm ready. I'm ready to get on a plane. I'm ready to have some camping trips. I'm looking forward to having that freedom and that flexibility, that I haven't had before. I'm looking forward to attending the TBEX Travel Conference this fall. I would really like to start speaking at some travel conferences, so that's a goal that I have on my radar within the next year. Belize, the Lobster Fest, is another one that I would really like to try and make happen this summer. We'll see. And I'm just looking forward to fleshing out kind of a new adventure list. I think I need to make a new one, even though I know it's not the start of the year, but I think it's kind of a fresh start for my life, honestly, because it'll be my first time not actively being someone's mom, like for my first time in adulthood. So I think I need to really think about it. Like I want to be really, really intentional about this next year and what I have. And I would really like to get to Africa in this next year. It probably won't be 2018, but early 2019 would be awesome.
All right, she's speaking it into existence. Excuse me. I'm excited to see what's next. OutdoorsyDiva.com is the website where you can read all of Lauren's blogs. And I'm curious to know, can others come with you on these adventures? Can they join you just in case they were, their ears started buzzing from all of your travel experiences?
Well, that's something that I hadn't thought about. If you join the group, Adventures of Lifestyle on Facebook, I will definitely be planning more kind of local based adventures this year for sure. I know we're planning a tubing trip because they've been asking for that, another kayaking trip as well. And it has come up in the group that we should do some kind of an actual travel trip. So maybe a group girls glamping trip could be on the horizon.
Oh, glamping. You might have to sign me up for that, even though I'm trying to be one with nature. If I can help it, I want to rough it out. I want to rough it out just to say that I did it and boom, check that off
We can
the
make that
list.
happen
You can make
too.
that happen.
Yes.
So you guys would be inside glamping and I'd be outside actually
You'll be
camping.
outside in your sleeping bag.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we put that out there in the universe so it can happen. Thank you so much. And lastly, if you would leave our listeners just with one nugget of information, you talked on a lot of different topics about, just what this experience has been like for you. But I guess one of the greatest lessons learned is what?
The greatest lesson that I have learned is step outside of your comfort zone and challenge yourself.
I love it, and I hope you guys love it as well. Thank you so much, Lauren Gay, OutdoorsyDiva.com. You can check out her blog or go across all of her social media platforms. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to having you back so that maybe you can share about that group glamping experience.
Thank you so much for having me, Tiffany.
We appreciate you tuning in to this morning's edition of